Hi, my good friend Felicity Fair, that's her pen name, has asked me to help her promote her new book. She'll be helping promote my album when it comes out, hopefully the end of next month. So, in order to help her, I'll be doing a reading from her newest book, which is called Moonbound, a badly written romance novella, which kind of translates to me. From what I'm told, there's going to be 4 books in the series at least, and the second one is pre-sale already. The first one is out on her page. You can find the link in the descriptions here. Okay, so Moonbound, Chapter 1. For those who have loved the wild and have chosen to stay. And still, after all this time, the moon has never once looked upon the earth without falling in love. Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Pines. The full moon hung heavy above Big Cat Hollow, a pale coin suspended in an ocean of black, casting silver light through the swaying pines, like some ancient god peering down through a gauze of mist. The fog drifted low between the tree trunks, curling around their bases like restless spirits, reluctant to disperse. The air had the clean bite of early autumn, each breath sharp enough to taste damp earth, rotting leaves, and the resinous tang of pine sap. Somewhere deep in the dark, crickets pulsate their rhythmic waves, their chirping almost hypnotic, a howl hooted once, twice, then fell silent. But beneath these familiar forest notes was something else, something older, a hush, a subtle stillness like a skipped heartbeat, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath, listening for something. Elena Bellamy could not name it. She stood at the window of her grandmother's cabin, both hands curled around a chipped enamel mug. The tea inside was weak, color of dishwater, but the generous pour of whiskey made up for it. She took a sip, and the heat tracing a slow, deliberate path down her throat. Her breath fogged the glass as she watched the forest sway under the moonlight. It was beautiful here, wild, remote, the kind of place that demanded a slowing of the mind. But tonight, something in that beauty felt warped, as though a shadow had been stitched into the edges of her thoughts. The cabin had always been her refuge. As a child, she'd spent entire summers here, learning to bait a hook, to paddle against the current, to skin her knees on sharp river stones without crying. Her grandmother, Agnes Bellamy, had been a force of nature herself, a sharp-witted, sharp-tongued, with a kindness that was conditional in the way the forest was kind, generous if respected, brutal if ignored. Now Agnes was gone. The cabinet was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Elena was no stranger to solitude. After years in crowded cities, sharing thin-walled apartments with strangers, drowning in traffic and deadlines, she had come to crave silence. But this was a different kind of quiet, not the soft, cottony stillness of snow or fog, but something heavier, a silence with weight, a silence that pressed down. Her skin prickled with the kind of unease that starts deep in the bones, the kind that makes you feel observed without knowing from where. Maybe it was the wind picking up, or was the way the pine branches scratched the tin roof like fingernails on slate. Maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe it was just the grief catching up to her now that there was nothing left to distract her. She turned from the window, floorboards groaning beneath her bare feet, in a sound that was at least familiar. The drive from Denver had taken nearly 20 hours, slowed by the endless road work and mudslide detour that forced her to miles to the mountains. She hadn't unpacked. The 2 battered suitcases she brought sat by the door like stranded travelers, waiting for the train that would never come. Her nerves were fried from the past week's events, and from the bizarre encounter she'd had this morning on her way up from the mountain. She had stopped to get gas at the only little store that dared exist way out here, the little mom and pop running the place were as nice and welcoming as Alina remembered from her last visit here years before. However, a triad of pickup trucks had pulled up at the same time she had. The kind with Carolina squats and two big wheels, full of rowdy young ranchers. They were noisy and wild and half drunk, and one of them had grabbed her arm from behind. One of them had grabbed her from behind and sniffed her and licked her. When she tried to walk out the door, he was the oldest one of the bunch, probably mid-30s, with black hair and a bar-room fight crook in his nose. "You sure smell pretty," he huffed against her ear. The old man behind the counter had yelled at the guys to back off and settle down, or he'd ban them again. Alina made a quick exit and locked the doors to her Jeep immediately. The neck-licking creep stood at the glass door, leering at her as she peeled out of the dirt parking lot. The funeral itself had already blurred. Closed casket, polite murmurs, too many faces she barely knew, offering condolences like coins dropped into a collection plate. Then came the estate meetings, signing papers she hadn't bothered to read closely, listening to cousins bicker over furniture and silverware. The main house down in the valley had already been stripped bare by those same cousins, circling like vultures. Alina hadn't fought them. She didn't want their heirlooms or China antique rugs. She just wanted this cabin, this solitude, this place where her grandmother's presence had seemed to linger in the way the wind slipped through the eaves. She wanted to grieve on her own terms, but to breathe without something watching, and if she was honest, to get quietly drunk, while the forest kept its secrets. Stepping out onto the porch, she eased herself into the rocking chair. The wood was warped and creaked and groaned with a familiar song. She took another sip from her mug. The night air wrapped around her like a cool shawl, smelling faintly of moss and rain. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled, a stream swollen from last week's storms. She closed her eyes and let the chair sway beneath her. For a moment, the forest seemed to exhale with her, and the heaviness in her chest loosened just slightly. Then came the sound. A crack, a sharp and sudden crack. Her eyes snapped open. A branch breaking. Not the quick snap of a squirrel, not the fluttery rustle of a raccoon nosing through leaves. Something heavier, something more deliberate. Her gaze slid to the left, scanning the tree line. The shadows were restless in the wind, shifting and bending, but one shadow did not sway. It stood taller, broader, still. Her hand tightened around the mug. "Who's there?" she called, a voice firmer than she had felt. The sound seemed to travel a few feet and then die, swallowed up by the pines. For a heartbeat there was nothing. Then a rustle of leaves, slow and measured. The shadow moved. It stepped partially into the moonlight, and the world seemed to tilt. A man, barefoot, shirt torn from the seams, face streaked with dirt, and something darker. Blood? His hair was matted, and his breathing was uneven, but it was his eyes that made her pulse stutter, catching the moonlight and throwing it back gold. Unnatural, inhuman, like an animal's eyes, flashing in the headlights. "Sorry," he rasped, voice raw, as if it hadn't been used in days. "I didn't mean to startle you." Startle? The mug slipped from her hand, clattering against the porch boards, splashing hot tea and whiskey across her bare feet. She stumbled backwards toward the door, her free hand groping blindly for the knob. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Who was this? What was he doing out here? And God, how long has he been standing there? What was this strange... What was with strange men creeping up on her today? But before she could find her voice, before she could shout, curse, or even breathe, he was gone. The forest swallowed him in a single breath. She stood there, panting, eyes fixed on the black wall of trees. Nothing, no movement, no sound, except for the wind whispering through the pines, carrying with it the unsettling certainty that she was not alone. Not anymore. That was chapter 1. If you like it, please go to the description and find the link for her page. Thank you so much.